Hello again, and this video is going to be dealing with a further explanation of the applied science of industrial hemp. We're going to be dealing with a game that I played to help get the state of Missouri to facilitate industrial hemp production. Now, this particular game is going to be based on the Canadian model because the state of Missouri does match several characteristics that the Canadian model now enjoys. Another reason for this is the fact that right now the World Trade Organization is changing, and it's going into a movement where it's going to try to get rid of countries supporting markets dealing with commodities, getting rid of subsidies, and because of the way that Brazil was able to win their case against the United States of America in regards to the cotton, in regards to the cotton subsidies, I think that we have to acknowledge that they've made their move, and we have to acknowledge that we need to make ours, which is to say that American farmers, if they're going to remain farmers, they're going to have to give us a product the market can bear. We also need to acknowledge that the commodity-based markets need to be self-contained. The state of Missouri is agribusiness, and because of the Canadian model proving that corn to hemp is viable in year one, it's also been theorized to work in cotton because of the way that cotton impacts the soil. And finally, I am going to be illustrating a game that I played in the state of Tennessee. I'll be using the same model, and this is going to be based on the idea that instead of actually getting Missouri to do it in the market device, we're going to use a test pod. We're going to use the Missouri Correctional Facility and the prison labor currently in the state of Missouri. Now we're going to be dealing with the game assumptions, and because we're going to be using the Canadian model, we're going to be transferring data that we have been able to confirm, or rather I have been able to confirm. And I'm going to be using the growing season for industrial hemp that's been reported and confirmed for 2010. In that growing season, the Canadian industrial hemp was able to get an aggregate from 20,000 to 25,000 acres in that growing season. That equates to 20 bushels per acre. The price at the time of harvest is, for the conventional hemp seed, is 200 to 400. Organic grown per acre is 800 to 1,000, and the average pound per acre of industrial hemp is about 800. It's also important that we note how they operate. The Canadian hemp farmers do sign a contract before the growing season, and they do set a price for that particular growing season. And these are the game assumptions that we're going to use to help us build a foundation for the one in the state of Missouri. We will now move into the profiling done for the labor force in Missouri. Because we're going to be using the prison test pod model, we have to be able to identify who we're going to be dealing with. Within brevity, we're just going to take a real quick look at the actual structure and the number of agents that we will be dealing with. In the state of Missouri, currently there are 20 facilities that are identified as correctional centers. In 2009, there were 30,000 plus adult inmates. In 2009, the annual cost per inmate was $16,000. The percentage of adult inmates that were incarcerated for non-violent crime is 47%. The reason that I identify non-violent because the fact that nonviolent criminals normally have a shorter sentence, and one of the reasons that we're using the prison is to not only give them a skill set, but we're also going to be doing in somewhat of a quasi-experiment on the possibility of alleviating recidivism of crime if we give them a market persona before they're released. And the the calculations for nonviolent labor would be about 14,000 in Missouri. The ratio we're going to be using is 10 inmates per acre of industrial hemp. And our anchor at year one is going to be 1,400 plus total acres of industrial hemp. The reason we said this as an anchor is because we have to identify that we don't want to actually extend ourselves beyond what the labor force has. Because we're using the prison system, we don't want other labor being required to be in there. Obviously, we're going to have to deal with the violent, non-violent. The numbers can fluctuate, of course, but here we have to identify that we need some place to begin. So at year one, we're going to be using the ratio of 10 inmates per 1 acre, which is going to require 1,400 total acres of industrial hemp. Let us now start talking about the actual game schematic that we're going to be using. This information was taken from the state of Missouri's breakdown of the agribusiness for 2010. Because we're going to be using corn and cotton in our comparison rationale, we're going to break it down bushels per acre. And the way that Missouri is sectioned off, the top 4 bushels ratio was in the southeast, east central, central, and southwest. We identify these as a game quadrant, and we identify the top 3 as our primaries, A, B, and C. D would be identified as a reserve, only to be used in times where A, B, and C had no utility. We identify the correctional centers per the state of Missouri, the ones that they have mapped out. We have the Southeast Correctional Center, Moberly Correctional Center, Chillicothe Correctional Center, and Northeast Correctional Center. We don't have to use these. These were just things that I identified that was in the proximity of the actual quadrants that we are now identify in this particular game. And when we identify our anchor, we have to set up rules of engagement in regards to the proximity and the parameter. The prison location must be within 50 miles of the farm that the hemp that they're going to be using. The prison location must be within 25 miles of the supply chain production. This game has only been played when pre-existing forms were in place. That means for production, we're talking about buildings that could allow for machinery to use plastics, insulation, fiberboard, food, clothing, sewing machines. If the prison has room for these things, the prison can actually use it there. But we have to identify where exactly the locations are going to be, and we need to identify that the prison labor, the raw material, and the supply chain must be within distance of each other. Okay, now we're going to start discussing the market persona, and we're going to have to set the table for what the farmer is going to be doing, and obviously using prison labor. This is going to be something that the people of Missouri might have a problem with. I'm not really going to get into I'm not going to get into criminology or sociology with this, but it is important that we understand the prison labor. We also need to understand the steward of the farm, but we need to set up the rules of engagement. So we're going to set this anchor for the farmer at 100 acres maximum per growing year. Now, because of the nature of industrial hemp, if it's done properly and the weather is agreeable, you can get 2 growing seasons. I don't really care about the crop yield in regards to what the farmer does, but because of the total number, I don't want just 1 or 2 farms getting all 1,400 acres, because that number may have to grow, or that number may have to decrease depending on the number of nonviolent prisoners available for labor per year. So I want multiple farmers having access to it, because I need to get those stories, I need the testimonials, I need them talking to each other about what they're doing. In regards to the actual fee, the farmer actually needs money. So what we're going to be doing, because we're going to be transferring from the Canadian model, we're still going to use their price index, but we're going to be cutting it in half. Because the state is going to be paying for the seed, it's going to be paying for the labor. The farmer is basically just going to be watching over the crop. And it's going to be broken down into the way that the Canadian model uses it, the conventional hemp seed versus the organic. The farmer is also going to have to set up a 3-year contract, which is going to connect them to the other farms in the region so they can rotate the crop so they won't overlap or overproduce per their region. And what we would identify if we had to cook on some kind of accounting ledger, the farmer's expense would be paid through the correctional center that they're working with. And of course that would be taken from taxable revenue. But eventually this fee would be taken from any kind of profits that could be utilized once the supply chain and once the market persona for the end user has been set. Now we're going to be dealing with something that is crucial to any given market device or any given business cycle, and this is something, because we're using the Canadian model, the Canadians in the first 5 years, they look completely foolish because they flooded the market with something that it could not bear. They didn't have a market share, they didn't have a customer base, they did not have a supply chain, and this is something that the American can take advantage of. Now, in this game, because we're doing it in real time, we're going to be dealing with the cities in Missouri of Moberly, Jefferson City, Rolla, and St. Louis. I've identified dead capital in all of these cities. I'm not going to tell you what to do with them. I'm just saying that the buildings are there. The idea that you can set up sewing machines, the idea that you're close to a high school or a junior college, the idea that you are going to be training a skill set, you got interstate, all those variants come into play. And this game is also going to be identified in the market persona that the product lines are going to be based on clothing, plastics, and food. The reason that food is third is because the Canadian model is already at full speed with that, and we need to just acknowledge that the clothing industry in America could easily go through an upgrade where people that are not going to go to college, they could still do something tactile or physical, and they just need the fabric. So clothing, shoes, jackets, blankets, shirts, underwear, whatever. The plastics is basically going to be about St. Louis. It's going to be about the automotive labor force. I am going to take advantage of the fact that it is pre-existing. Some of the primary variants used here are going to be access to an interstate railroad. Would be nice to have a speed rail, get me to the ocean. We're also going to be looking at the educational level of the labor, not only in the correctional centers, but if this experiment does work, eventually the Missouri citizen is going to have to apply for these jobs, and we're going to be looking at the education level of what each job can do, what each person brings to a job. We're also going to be dealing with skill set, So here we're talking about the ability for the industrial hemp production or the supply chain to give students that are not going to college some kind of market persona based on skill set that they learned doing these actual jobs. To close out this video, now we're going to be addressing some of the conditionals of this game because this game has changed, because obviously we're no longer talking about Tennessee. Every viewer of this video is going to have to understand that the people of Missouri have to be honest about what they can accomplish and what they are. So we're going to need empirical data. So these conditionals are going to be like any other game conditionals. They're going to have to be able to adapt, or there's no reason to keep them. Some of the scoring that we would identify in this game is going to be based on the quality assurance of the crop yield, the quality assurance mandates set forth by the prison labor, the same QA that you might find in the private market. We're also going to be dealing with some of the constructs built on the farmer, because of the fact that we're going to need testimonials, we're going to need empirical data from them about what it did to the soil, what it looked like from month to month, basically what happened in Missouri during the time that it was growing industrial hemp. And we're also going to be looking at the overall supply and production chain in Missouri. Although I've said up here in this game, we still have to deal with it in the real world. Really, you couldn't do it till after 36 months. So, beginning at year 4, these scores would have to be able to identify if there were any breaks in the chain, if things had to go through adaptation, or if things had to be removed completely. We would also be dealing with the prison labor, talking about recidivism, trying to see that if a market persona was built in prison, would it keep them from going back to a life of crime, causing a problem for society. Another thing that was identified in this game was the connection of agribusiness to other countries. 4-H is extremely popular in Missouri, and I have to take that in consideration, that the 4-H can reach out to Australia and China and India and Canada, and actually the men and women that make up the 4-H, that could be their training day. They could easily go to Canada. They could get college credit or high school credit for working on a hemp farm. Some of our own students could go into the production and see how the hemp oil is produced and see how the food is produced, and we could actually use that as a means of bridging out into a global theater production. Something that needs to be addressed, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it, is going to be the ownership after year 9, when the experiment would end. Would it remain with the state? Would it be a co-op? Would it be sold to private in an auction? And we're also talking about collectivism. The Missouri Hemp Share, Missouri would be identified as a company, and the health of its hemp production could secure through a credit union some kind of Missouri Hemp Share that could be sold on the Chicago Merc. My final thought on this game, and I know that these videos are they're requiring a lot of time for the viewer, but this is something that I think, again, it just needs to be the beginning of a conversation. I know that there have been problems down south about using prison labor. I know that because of the unemployment right now, many people in Missouri might find it a little bit difficult to justify jobs going to people that have committed crime. But because of the fact that you're already pre-existing the funding of the correctional facilities, I'm not saying that you would have to use it I'm not saying that you would have to use this game schematic the way that it's been built. This is just something that we could use as a conversation starter in regards to it. I don't want anything to really scare people off about the possibilities of what's happening here, but it is relevant to identify that if states like Missouri are going to remain sovereign, they're going to have to get a raw material with zero transportation cost. Getting even a country like Mexico to produce industrial hemp, the shipping cost would have to be added into the production cost. And because you've got so many farmers in Missouri that are on subsidies, it's just completely irrational for you to purchase hemp in another country when you could easily grow it here yourself. And I can't emphasize enough that a lot of the foreign countries that operate in the World Trade Organizations, they're no longer tolerating people that are securing their own goods. Securing their own place in wealth markets. The American farmer is going to have to start being honest about what they can do, and they're going to have to acknowledge that industrial hemp is viable, but the window for entry is getting smaller. The rest of the world is not going to wait for us. So the sooner the conversation begins, the better off everybody's going to be. Again, this is Stephen Wilson. I'm a libertarian. I'm running for Congress in the Missouri 3rd District. And thank you for your time.